This is Alabama Politics with Steve Flowers, an in-depth interview with Alabama's top political newsmakers. Now, from the studios of Troy University, here is Steve Flowers.
I'm Steve Flowers, and welcome to Alabama Politics. Folks, we have a great guest tonight. We're fortunate to have the Attorney General of Alabama, Luther Strange. Luther, good to have you on the show again.
Steve, love being here. Thank you.
Luther's been on our show a lot, y'all. I remember when he first ran for Attorney General, he was on and we did the show, and you had your boys with you.
I did. That's right.
I forget your wife's name.
Melissa.
Melissa. Y'all been married about 35 years, haven't you?
33.
33
Put me
years.
on the spot. 33.
33 years.
Yeah.
And she's from Jefferson County. You from Jefferson County originally?
Both grew up in Jefferson County, and we've got our two boys, and they're growing up.
You know, you brought one, if not both, those boys when you first ran 5 or 6 years ago, and they're tall as you, just about, ain't they?
Steve, they both grown up. They're both 6'8", 6'9". I look them eye to eye, and you look them eye to eye, and they've turned out to be great young men.
Tell me let's get caught up with them if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
I want to follow what they're doing and everything.
Well, our oldest son, Luke, worked for Joe Bonner, Congressman Bonner from Mobile for 5 years. Went back to, was going to school at night. Now he works for the American Enterprise Institute.
In Washington.
In Washington. It's a free market
conservative
group. I'm real proud of him. And
does he have a law degree?
No, he just got a master's.
Where did he go to undergraduate school?
He went to a little school called Rhodes College.
Oh, yeah,
Memphis.
great school, Memphis.
And then he got a master's at Johns Hopkins in Washington. He loves that stuff. And he's married to our daughter-in-law, Laura, who's a beautiful girl, and they've been married 2 years, and we just had our first grandchild.
Boy or girl?
Boy, little boy, and he's just a few weeks old.
What'd they
that's
name
a big
him?
deal. Luke, little Luke. Named him after his dad.
Congratulations.
That's fantastic. And our younger son is at UAB, and he's studying to apply to medical school next year.
Where did he go to undergrad? Tulane?
No, he went to Trinity University. It's another little small school in San Antonio, Texas. He got a little scholarship out there, which I appreciated, and he's loved that. So he wants to go into healthcare.
Y'all have moved to Pike Road, and I guess you need to being here in the Attorney General's office. But Luther, we hadn't visited on air in about a year or so. Boy, you had a tremendous victory for Attorney General. I want to congratulate. I've written this in my column. Luther was elected Attorney General overwhelmingly, had a tough Republican primary in 2010, and then won overwhelmingly in general election in 2010. He's beginning his second term as Attorney General now, and he had $2 million in Indian gambling money spent against him. They got a candidate in the race, and he got the same 60% margin that Bentley and everybody else got. I mean, that's pretty strong. I mean, they didn't have any opposition.
I know.
mean, you had Bentley, Ivey, Bentley for governor, Ivey for lieutenant governor. John McMillan got a pretty good vote.
He did.
And then Young Boozer.
He did.
All 5 of you constitutional officers, and you're the only one who got any. By run against you, the Indians got mad because you were trying to make them be fair about this stuff, you know. And
I know.
You know, and then they spent $2 million. You still beat them 60-40.
Well, you know, the best revenge, I guess, is just winning and doing your job. And I really appreciate you saying that, Steve, because it was a tough campaign, but you know, I felt like we were doing the right thing, and I'm really glad the people of the state saw that and saw it for what it was, and gave us such a big victory. It was just really satisfying.
You handled it well too. I remember watching the. I do the analyst stuff for CBS station here in Montgomery and Birmingham. Your victory speech was just very humble and and the whole campaign, you were never rattled by the amount of money being spent, you know, and it was almost limitless.
It was
limitless. You had to go out and raise your money,
I know.
You know, from like most people do, but
I know.
somebody gets a chunk of $1 million put into a campaign.
It's unprecedented, but you know, when you get support from lots, as you know, from individuals all around the state, it translates into votes, you know, and people were signifying that they appreciated the job we were doing. And I never, you know, in my job, Steve, I just try and do my job and my duty. You know, I don't take things personally. It wasn't ever personal with me. It never is. You know, it's about what I've sworn to do. And just try and treat everybody fairly and follow the law, you know.
You and Luther and I have a close friend, and we both are good friends with Richard Shelby.
Oh, yeah.
We love old Shelby, don't we?
He's fantastic. And we are very lucky, Steve, as you know, to have him as a friend, number one, and to have him in the Senate. He could not be, I mean, you know him better than anyone, but don't you think he's probably the most powerful senator we've ever had in Alabama?
I have, in my book I've got coming out in May called Alabama's Political Stories, I rank him along with our two great senators, Lister Hill and John Sparkman.
Yep.
You remember when we were little boys,
Yep.
Sparkman and Hill were real powers.
Real power.
I mean, if you went to Washington in the 1960s, 50s and 60s, and even up to 1970, and you got in the elevator, and your press secretary, Mike Lewis, knows Washington. He probably was too young to know this, but when I worked for Bill Dickinson
Yep.
when I was a young boy, and I'd go to Washington with Bill in the summertime, and you get on the elevator, every accent was a Southern accent because it was a Southern town. Because every senator you take, we had Hill and Sparkman, Georgia had Talmadge, Louisiana had Long. They were all chairman of committees.
I know.
Every major committee was chaired by a Southern senator. So then it changed a little bit to Northern accents. Now you get an elevator in Washington, it's all foreign. You know, if it's people foreigners, Mike will probably tell you that too. You get an elevator, you know, it's like foreign people. But going back,
it's a foreign place, that's for sure.
Getting back to Shelby though, Luther, you know, I would say he's going to break Sparkman's longevity after he's reelected in 2016.
Yep.
And even though Shelby's 80 years old, he's in good health.
Fantastic.
He's made every county in the state this year and seems energetic. And he's chairman of banking. And he'll, if Cochran retires in Mississippi, he's going to be chairman of appropriations.
Exactly.
Next year. And you know, if you think he brought home the bacon for the last 20 or 30 years, you ain't seen nothing.
I know. Well, you know, the good thing is he and Senator Sessions, who I know is a good friend,
now.
they are both, the one thing they've done is they've stayed in touch with Alabama. You know, they haven't gotten up there and forgotten where they're from. And so we're lucky.
Well, we're lucky to have both of them. And Shelby's been there since '86, so it's now 2015. He's approaching, was that 30 years?
I guess it is, Steve. It's hard to believe.
16 from '86 is 30 years.
Yeah.
So at the end of this term, he'll have 30 years, and he's going to run again. And that's all Sparkman and Hill did. But Sparkman was chairman of banking.
Right.
And Lister Hill was chairman of public welfare. So I put Shelby in a class of 3.
That's a strong company right there. It really is.
He's made the top 3. And I watched him the other night, and my daughter Jenny, who's a lawyer in Birmingham, and I were going to the Republican thing together here in Montgomery. And he was standing in line. I said, Jenny, I can't believe he's having to stand in line to get the elevator down at the Renaissance. That's one of the 5 most powerful men in the country.
It is. That's right.
I mean, Shelby really is.
He is. Well, he's unpretentious.
He loves you too.
I love him.
We talked about you at breakfast that morning.
Well, he's been a great mentor to me, and we've talked about, we've been able to go, you know, hunting together just on our vacation time, on off time, all over the place, and he's just a fun, genuine person. He's been a great mentor.
Y'all, I used to go to Washington, stay in Luther's apartment when he was up there. Did you know that?
Well,
Mike?
we can't talk about that, Steve.
Well, I thought so Steve still should have got me a hotel room. I was going to testify for Torrey.
Saving money.
I know it. Anyway, I didn't mean to get off on all that.
That's good.
But Luther's done a great job as Attorney General. That's why folks reelected him at the clip he did, and not just because he's my friend, but he's doing a great job. Luther, you know, we're right in the throes of a legislative session, and you and I were talking earlier, you have an excellent relationship with the district attorneys around the state. I've never seen an attorney general whose first day on the job, you went out to court those DAs, which really should be a coordinated effort to fight crime in the state, and they all like you a lot. When I've talked to DAs around the state, they'll say, boy, we've got somebody that's got our back.
I appreciate you saying that, Steve, because I've spent an awful lot of time developing those relationships, and it's really important because, you know, if you think about law enforcement, it's a team sport. I tell people, you know, it's the police officers on the ground, sheriffs, first responders, it's the DAs that prosecute these crimes all over the state. Then it's our office that backs them up. We've got their back. We handle all the appeals. It all works together, you know, and so if we're not friends and working together, not to say we always agree on everything, but we know what side we're on with the good guys, and we're all after the bad guys, and so that's a real important relationship for me.
Now, they have conferences once or twice a year, twice a year.
They'll have their winter and summer conferences, and I go. I send lawyers who are experts in different fields to do that. You know, at the national level too, Steve, I've gotten to be good buddies with some of my friends from other states, Georgia, Florida, our surrounding friends.
And you're going to host the conference?
I am. I'm hosting a conference of all the Southern Attorneys General. It's a bipartisan group from Virginia all the way to Texas, and they're all coming. I want to show them some Alabama hospitality.
So take them to the coast?
I'm going to take them to the coast. We're going to go down to Point Clear to the Grand Hotel, and I'm going to show them how beautiful Alabama is.
Luther, you stay in touch with those DAs all the time too, don't you?
I do, Steve. We're constantly working together because sometimes they'll have a case they can't handle, and I'll help them out with that. We help them move things around, and we give them the support they need. If they have a particularly hard issue or something they don't have the experience in, then we'll come help them. We do it all the time.
Luther, you don't have a vote in the legislature, obviously, but the state, and I'm not sure that every legislator, and you know, they're all Republicans, and not all of them, but 72 out of 105 in the House and 26 out of 35 in the Senate, and they've all are extremely conservative. But the state really is. I mean, they've paid Peter to play Paul, whatever you call it. They kicked the can down the road, and the general fund really is broke. And I'll give you an example because you have really had the back of the public state troopers. But Alabama right now, if you talk about cutting the state budget, we have 219 troopers, and the state of Maryland has 1,600.
Right.
And they're the same size we are, and smaller in population and geographic area. And the average state trooper car has 200,000 miles on it. You know, that's just not safe. And somebody's wife has, one of these guys who said, I don't want to vote for anything. You got to have a government. I mean, I'm conservative as you are. I mean, Benny's conservative. He's not a tax and spend liberal. This guy didn't want to raise anybody. He didn't want to raise that. But I'm just saying it affects your office too, to a certain extent. I mean, people don't realize that it cuts the Attorney General's office, it cuts the judges, cuts the I mean, the point I'm trying to get at is not just the state troopers, but you know, you get thrown all these problems that the legislature causes. And I'm not trying to say they've wasted their time, but most people who know anything about the law know that the abortion bill they passed was probably unconstitutional. The immigration bill they passed was probably unconstitutional. Well, you and I both have the same philosophy they do. We think that the immigration laws ought to be upheld.
Yeah. We
think people, you know, ought to have, you know, we're both pro-life, but you know, what I'm getting around to is we got a prison system in this state. I'm talking about those troopers. We can only house, our prisons are built, housed to hell, a little over 12,000 prisoners. We got 25,000 prisoners. Yeah. Some federal judge is going to look at that and say, there's certain constitutional, then you got to defend it.
Right.
You know, you got to have your staff over defend it. They probably cut your budget too.
Well, they have done that. Last, as you know, last session, we got zero appropriations from the general fund. But the point you're raising is critical, Steve, because as I stay in my lane, which is the chief law enforcement officer of the state, if we don't have a system that all works together, so the courts have to be funded, so you get your day in court. My office is funded so we can prosecute these criminals and put them in jail. If we don't do that, if we don't give money to our law enforcement men and women, the troopers, it's embarrassing that we have so few troopers. And I spend my days with the troopers, as you know. I travel with them, and they're the finest group of people in the state. If we don't support them, then who's hurt? It's the people, the victims of crime, who don't volunteer to go into the system. You know, they're drugged in there by some crime, and it's critical. And if you think about what's the basic function of our state government, it's public safety, defending the people. Right. You know, from crime. And so I'm very concerned about that this session. You make a great point about the prisons. And I've worked with Senator Ward, who you know is trying to take a lead on that, and I've talked to the judges, and we want to try and address that issue. But it's a fine balance. I don't want them to put prisoners ahead of prosecutors and policemen and victims. And that's the debate we're going to have, you know, when they go into session.
It's amazing. Going back, Luther, to get off that, to change courses a little bit in federal, you and some of the other attorney generals around the country have taken a proactive role in trying to say to President Obama that this executive amnesty thing is wrong. Cover that for our viewers, if you will. Tell them exactly what we're talking about when this amnesty for immigration thing that they may not be aware of what, but that phrase is used, the amnesty, executive amnesty thing. If you'd go into that, you know, and tell our viewers in an elementary way, kind of what
Yeah,
the president's
I'd
done.
be glad to do that, Steve, because it's very similar to a lot of other issues we're working on. There's a core group of conservative attorneys general, and I'm part of that group, have been a leader in that group, that has been pushing back against the federal government when they exceed their power. You know, so for example, on the Obamacare lawsuit, you know, where we 27 AGs sued the government that were going too far, taking over our healthcare system. We have another case coming up very soon on that subject. On the immigration issue, and there have been others as well, EPA and things we could talk about, where they've gone beyond their authority, we think, and if we've sued them. We've sort of been the last line of defense against the federal government overstepping its bounds. And so the great example of that's the amnesty. The federal government, you know, is supposed to enforce our immigration laws. If they did, we wouldn't have these problems. If they just did enforce the laws that are on the books. What President Obama has decided to do is grant amnesty to 5 million people who are here illegally. He's trying to do it based on what he calls his prosecutorial discretion and his executive authority to do that. And I agree with Senator Sessions, and dozens of my colleagues who've joined in this lawsuit agree that he does not have the authority to do that Congress makes the laws on this. It's his job to faithfully execute the laws. He's the chief executive. He can't just pick and choose the laws he likes and he doesn't like. Then we're not living in America anymore if we have a king. That's what we got away from when we came over here from England, you know. And so we've joined together. That lawsuit is in Texas, which is a good place for us. The judge in Texas has said, you have exceeded your authority. Said, what you've done is unconstitutional and I prohibit you from doing it. That's where we are right now as this process unfolds. And it just goes to show you that our working together, our conservative attorneys general, have really truly become the last line of defense against this government, because it seems like all they do in Congress these days is give speeches and talks and interviews and so forth. But we're actually in court every day making a difference by stopping these things. And I think we're going to see a lot more of this, Steve, in the next couple of years, and we're going to be very involved in doing that.
Well, I applaud you for doing that. It's really caused a rankle with one of the biggest risks. That and the pipeline thing,
Yeah,
has caused the biggest partisan rift in Washington. Luther, going back to that, kind of tell our viewers a little bit about what the Obama administration is doing to states like ours who are reliant on certain energies. I mean, they have arbitrarily and ironically, or not ironically, but coincidentally, most of the states who are coal producing are red states.
that's right.
Republican states, you know, so it's almost like he's doing it partisan reason, but,
Well,
but it's also, he comes from that left-wing, left California mentality.
right.
He won't send billions of dollars to, quote, solar companies to start,
I mean,
you know.
crony capitalism and all that. But you've written about this, Steve, and you are very, very familiar with this issue. But they have an agenda in the EPA, which has become way beyond what it was intended to do, which was to protect the environment and be a regulatory agency, to now becoming almost like a law unto itself that decides what our policy, our energy policy is going to be in this country. And the Obama administration has said, we're against coal. We just don't want any coal or really any carbon fuels, natural gas, petroleum, or anything else. They want solar and electricity. I mean, solar and wind, I guess, are the only two left that they would accept, you know. But the point of all that is they are, by shutting down coal-fired power plants without any legal authority and without any real ultimate benefit to the environment, they're affecting our economy by raising utility rates, and they're affecting our economy by putting people out of work. And it's not just Republicans. You know, we've got a group, Michigan would be included in that group. Montana has a Democrat governor. Look at West Virginia, Steve, where you have Joe Manchin, the senator from Virginia, West Virginia, huge coal mining.
He's a Democrat, isn't he?
He's a Democrat, and he's in a tough spot because the
Do
governor.
they have both their senators Democrats, or do you know?
They have a new Republican senator, Caputo, I think is her name.
But West Virginia, Kentucky, and we'd probably be third or fourth on the list
Oh yeah,
as far as coal producing.
absolutely. And it's a policy, and Congress sets policies. They set energy policy. It's the president's job to execute the policy Congress passes. And Congress never said we're going to put coal out of business. You know, coal is a critical part of our economy, and we can produce electricity using it cleanly. You know, but again, our issue is, look, you know, elections have consequences. We elected a very liberal president who has an agenda, but he can't exceed his authority. And so we are working together again with dozens of attorneys general who are affected to sue the administration and the EPA specifically on all these regulations that are trying to shut down coal without the authority to do that.
Luther, if we can, take a few minutes, if you would. The biggest thing that you had to take on and have been involved in since day one as Attorney General, this is beginning your 5th year as Attorney General of Alabama, the BP case could be the salvation for the general fund. And I don't want to press you on dollar amounts because it's a plaintiff, I mean, it's a civil case, but take our viewers down that road, if you would, and tell your involvement over the years and where we are with that case, and what you think might be the final adjudication, because you've been in court, in circuit court, federal circuit court in New Orleans for years, and I remember last time on the show, you think that's a fair judge that y'all drew.
I do, Steve, and I appreciate you mentioning that because that is the biggest environmental disaster in our nation's history. Alabama was right at ground zero when our coastline was covered with oil for 3 months, and it shut down our economy.
What year was this now?
2010. We're coming up on the 5-year anniversary on April 20th.
All y'all were elected, the people
That's
who were
right.
in constitutional offices that same. It was summer, wasn't it?
It was in
fall?
the spring, April 20th.
That's right, spring of 2010. Bentley was elected governor, you were elected attorney general.
That's right.
Young Boozer and all,
Ivy, everybody was like,
yeah.
So we came in and we inherited this this situation, and so what I did was decide to handle it with our own in-house lawyers. We have great lawyers.
Save a lot of money.
Saved, we think, at least $25 million so far, because we know Louisiana spent that much money on
Have
their
they on
lawyers.
private lawyers?
They have. So that money goes, citizens keep that instead of giving it to
now
the
you've
outside
assigned
lawyers.
certain lawyers that are doing just that, haven't you?
I have, and we worked out an arrangement to work with private lawyers and with the United States government, because we're all on the same side trying to make sure the
Are
defendants.
you the only one who just didn't hire any private lawyers? Any other state
I
did
think
that?
so. I don't think any other state
Louisiana
has done it.
has spent 25 million.
Yeah.
That's coming right out of their pocket.
Exactly. And we're ahead of them. That's the good news, Steve, is we've, when I got involved in New Orleans, the judge, maybe because I'd gone to Tulane, I'm a member of the Louisiana Bar, I know some of the lawyers there, he appointed me the coordinating counsel for the 5 states involved, Florida all the way to Texas.
Who are the 5?
We got Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas.
Now, Florida was hurt the most, though, weren't they, environmentally and dollar-wise?
I think Louisiana probably was hurt the most environmentally. Florida was hurt environmentally, but tourism, you know, and Alabama was in both categories. We had a lot of environmental damage, Bayou La Battery, all of our fisheries, and tourism.
We'd be third probably, wouldn't we?
I don't know. I've always
Texas,
said,
that's right, Texas.
Texas was hurt because they shut down the whole oil and gas industry, you know, and this is what they live on. Every state was hurt differently. The good news is the judge consolidated everything in New Orleans. What he's done is tried the case.
Where does judge come from? He's
a Louisiana, New Orleans guy.
Is he a regular federal district judge?
Regular federal district judge. In these complex cases, Steve, where you get thousands of plaintiffs, because you think about it, you got 5 states, you've got thousands of individuals in all those states who are hurt as individuals, businesses and citizens. Then you've got the United States government, huge, and then you've got the defendants, BP and the other ones that were out there when that rig blew up, Transocean. You know, 11 people were killed, and and millions of barrels of oil were spilled into the Gulf. So over time, and I've been personally involved in this myself, it's been a top priority. We have tried the case in 3 phases, and it's all been completed, Steve. So what the judge found was BP was grossly negligent for the spill. They were grossly negligent. That's important because it means how you calculate the fines. The second thing he found out was there was over 3 million barrels of oil spilled into the Gulf. The third thing he has already heard, and he hasn't issued his opinion yet, is what is he going to apply, what kind of penalty are they going to get? And it could be up to $4,000 a barrel. Bottom line is, for Clean Water Act penalties for our state and the other states, you're talking about potentially $13 billion. That money would go and be split between the U.S. government and the 5 states. I think Alabama could receive over $1 billion in these fines and penalties. So that's a huge accomplishment to get that money. Now that would go to restore the environment and to projects along the Gulf. And there's a commission of people, the governor and local elected officials and others, who will decide where that goes. So for example, Steve, it could be the Gulf Coast Hotel that people have talked about as something that money might be spent on.
Bentley wants to do that, I think.
And the governor wants to do that. And that's for somebody else to decide. My job is to make sure we get the...
We'll take $1 billion to build a hotel, though.
No, that's quite a bit of money, and it'd be really important for us. Now, you mentioned the general fund. Where we are now, as we sit here today, we've had those findings made, grossly negligent, how much oil spilled and all that. Now the question for our state is, what were our economic damages? When that economy was shut down, the whole coast was covered with oil, that ricocheted all the way up, rippled all the way up our economy, and we lost tax revenue to the state treasury. I think that's contributed to the deficit we have today. You know, I think that we lost that money, we didn't get it back. So the judges said, Alabama, you can go first. You can be the first state to try your case. And what we've asked them to do.
We'll be first.
We'll be first. All the other states are waiting behind us. And what we've asked the judge to do is try that case, to come from New Orleans and come to Montgomery and sit in federal court here in Montgomery. That's where we originally filed.
It's a bench trial, though.
Well, that's the other question. We've asked him to come here, and we've asked him for a jury. Now, BP doesn't want to have a jury, and they'd really rather not try the case here in
So
Montgomery.
he has not ruled out the possibility?
He has not ruled out that possibility, Steve, and we've requested.
For all 5 states, just us?
Well, I think if we get one, the other states will try and get one too, but it depends a little bit on what the state law is and the state. So that is coming up hopefully by the end of this year, at the latest early next year. I'm hoping sooner. We're in the process of discovery and taking depositions and making our case, you know, what was the damage. And I will personally lead our team in that case, and I'm hoping, I can't predict any numbers, but it's important because every dollar that we get will go into the general fund. Then the legislature and the governor can decide how they want to spend it. It won't help us in this session, Steve, but it will be something that'll, in the long run, be
something
good.
coming down the pike.
Absolutely.
Sure is. Luther, we've only about a minute left. I'll ask you one question. When you were out campaigning last year, what was the prevalent question? Did people ask you about BP? What do they perceive attorney generals? What was the question? Like governor, you get an obvious question.
You do.
You know, like, what are you going to do about taxes? What are you going to do about true? But what was the prevalent question you'd be asking civic clubs if you'd ask a question as attorney general? Well, what's on their mind? It's a BP thing. When I think of what you're doing now, I think first about BP.
Yeah.
Because it's the biggest thing. Wouldn't you say it's the biggest thing?
BP's big. Depending on if you're South Alabama, BP, of course, is huge. North Alabama, further north, you get less so. It's funny, Steve, probably the thing I heard, of course, crime and law and order and keeping the community safe, keeping bad guys in jail, protecting victims, that's always the key thing that we think about. But I hear an awful lot about what's going on in Washington, you know, that there's just an out-of-control federal government, that it affects our, not just, you know, our economic life, but our religious freedoms, you know, our religious liberties, our Second Amendment rights, you know, taking our guns away from us. And we're on the front lines of pushing back and protecting the Second Amendment. You know, and go on down the line, you know, immigration and all these issues where the federal government is just not following the Constitution and the rule of law. And since I defend the Constitution and the rule of law, I get a lot of questions about that.
I was curious. Well, Luther, our time's up.
Can't believe it.
It goes by in a hurry. Folks, our guest tonight has been Alabama Attorney General Luther Strange. Big Luther. He's 6'9", y'all, and wears about a 15 shoe. And I'm glad to have Luther on the show. We're glad he took time, his busy schedule, to be with us. And we hope you viewers will watch next week for Alabama Politics. Thank you very much.